There have been more than 28,000 suspected cases worldwide and over 11,000 deaths. 4 of those cases were in the US. And although we were declared Ebola-free in November 2014, Lindsey Hallen knew the fight against Ebola was not over.
People are worried here on a daily basis of new cases coming into the country, and we can do as much as we want here and have all these protocols set in place, but ultimately until we end this outbreak in West Africa, everyone's going to be at risk. I had been to Africa a couple of times before. I never thought that I would be going to West Africa specifically for this. There's not a whole lot there. There was kind of like a little small town area, little stands and shops set up. There's posters, there's billboards, there's paint on concrete walls, everything that says "kick out Ebola" or "Ebola is real." That was a popular saying everywhere. The conditions of the way the ETU was set up is sort of what I thought it would be. It's nothing like a hospital here. Most of the patients would come in by ambulances. So the ambulances now in Sierra Leone are pretty much designated Ebola ambulances. So they would go into villages and pick up people who had met the case definition. The patient would walk themselves out into our triage area, which was basically a gravel area that was open, it wasn't indoors, and we'd have a couple chairs because we get multiple patients at a time, and one stretcher. If they couldn't ambulate, then they would lay down on the stretcher, and that's where we would try to question them, ask them if they had contact with anyone with Ebola, take their temperature, and if they met case definition, that's where we would put an IV in and start fluids on them, and then assign them to a ward and walk them into the ETU.
The lack of equipment, supplies and facilities means there is no monitors, no side rails on the beds, no way of taking vital signs or even simply taking blood pressure.
A lot of people who were dying of Ebola there would never die if they were being treated here in the US. The one that we have here, there's a glass door outside. We have phones usually inside the room and outside, so you can communicate with the patient. You can see them. I think in some of the larger hospitals that are designated Ebola units, they have cameras inside the room so that you can watch the patients from outside. We didn't have any of that, so you didn't really know what to expect. You can't see the patients from the outside, so you have no idea really what you're walking into, and it's usually been a couple hours since anyone has been in to see them, so it could be a completely different story than what you had expected. The patient's status would, decline drastically sometimes. Patients you thought were, or who were up and walking to the bathroom on their own, sometimes you'd go in and you would find them deceased. A lot of patients had seizures, and if you're not in the room with them, we didn't really have medication to treat the seizures anyway, but at least if we were in there, we could help position them so they didn't injure themselves. But if you're not in there, you would go in after several hours. You'd find patients who are in a bed on one side of the room, completely on the other side, laying underneath a bed in a contorted position. People would be sitting on buckets where they would, go to the bathroom at the bedside if they couldn't get to the bathroom in the back. Some people would rip out their IVs because they would get delirious. Anything. I mean, you had no idea really what it was going to be like. There was a time where I was in the ETU with a mother who was fighting Ebola, and she was very, very sick, and her son had just died the day before, and I was in there treating her son as well. And so I went in and wanted to say, I was with your son when he passed away. I'm so sorry. And the local nurse that I was there with, the national nurse, she was like, no, don't say that. That's in the past, and she needs to focus on what's happening right now, and we need to encourage her to fight and be strong. And so it was really not mentioned at all. So it was kind of definitely a different approach. We're used to, if a family member, or if someone lost a family member, paying your respects and trying to console them. But over there, those people are still fighting for their own life, and they're still battling the disease themselves. And bringing up the past and all of these tragic things that have happened to them isn't going to help them to fight, and it's not going to encourage them to get better themselves. I'm explaining it now and it seems crazy to think that there's a place like this where this is how patients are living and dealing with the disease. But when you're there, it's just how things are there. It's completely unacceptable, but when you're dealing with it on a daily basis, it just becomes part of your daily routine. And all of your coworkers that you're working with are seeing the same things with the patients that they're seeing. So the connection that I had with the other staff members was huge. I mean, I think that's what got us through each day, because everyone is experiencing the same thing that you are. If you're working with a good team, it makes all the difference. Just like it is here. You have a bad day at work and you want to go grab a drink with a coworker, and it helps to get you through the day.
The effects on the Ebola survivors are continuously being discovered, and Lindsey has some advice for anyone who would like to be involved.
If anyone is on the fence about going, and if the fear is the one thing that is stopping them from going, it was one of the best things I've ever done.